We've been looking at model integration workflows and looking at several different methods for integrating our different discipline-specific models together. We've looked at the whole issue of linking Revit models, and we've looked at how we could integrate those models using BIM 360 Glue. Using Glue, we had the notion of exporting a model to BIM 360 Glue using the Glue add-in, and then merging those models and finding clashes using the Clash tool in BIM 360 Glue. I want to show you now another tool, Navisworks Manage, which is used probably more comprehensively in the construction industry, which does a very similar thing. In this tool, what we're going to do is, again, export a model to Navisworks Manage, but use the Navisworks plugin to Revit to export that model. And then in the Navisworks Manage application, we can merge those models and use something called the Clash Detective. But what you're going to see as we do this is that it's incredibly parallel to what's gone on in BIM 360 Glue. So you're not learning a whole lot new conceptually. It's really more about just using a different tool. BIM 360 Glue being a cloud-based one, or Navisworks is more of a file-based one. Navisworks Manage is a little bit older as a technology, but again, more widely used. So I just want you to have both in your toolkit, so you'll be able to use whichever tool is the one that's available to you on your project. So let's come on over, and I'm going to start by going to the Revit application. Okay, in the Revit application here, let us go through and kind of take a look at both an architectural model and a structural model that we can use. I'm going to go over to the architectural model first. And again, what are these models? These models are just the same ones that we've been using in these examples. It's the ones that you'll be using as part of the practice exercise. It's where it says Model Integration in BIM 360 Glue 2.4b. Again, there's an architectural, a structural, and a mechanical file there available for you to work with. So the architectural file is no different for getting started. The big difference I'll tend to do is actually just, again, create a export view. You don't really need a separate one, but I'll just create one for the sake of having something that's a little bit different. I'll just duplicate the 3D view, in case I needed to have something a little bit different that I wanted to export to Glue versus exporting to Navisworks. And I can use the whole notion of visibility graphics to control what's available and shown in each of those different views that's exported. So that's pretty much it. I'm just going to go through and create the view. And now, as opposed to using the Glue add-in to go through and export things, if you've installed Navisworks Manage on your machine, under the Add-ins tab, under External Tools, you'll have something that says Navisworks 19. So again, if that's not there, it's because Navisworks isn't installed on your machine, and we can install Navisworks and it would appear. Let's go ahead and kind of go through and use it now. So when in the file dialog that opens now, as opposed to sending something to the cloud, we're going to create a special type of file called a Navisworks cache, or an NWC file. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just leave that set the way it is. In terms of the Navisworks settings, you're going to find there's all sorts of things we can change, but the default settings tend to be right for what we're going to need. So I'm just going to leave those set as is. Actually, I said OK to that. Let me kind of pop back over there. There we go. So we can give it a name. I could call it mixed use architectural.nwc, decide where I want to put it. If I want to put it on my desktop, that's fine. You'd probably put it somewhere that you would then, like a folder on a cloud drive or something that you transmit to your BIM manager. Okay, but I'm just going to leave it on my desktop for now to kind of make it a little bit easier for me to find. It's going to export the elements now. And at some level, this may look very familiar to what we were doing in the BIM 360 Glue export, because it actually uses the same basic technology. So we've exported an NWC file. Let's go over to the structural model and do the same sort of thing. So here we are. Again, I'm going to just create for myself a view. I'll call it export to Navisworks there. And the idea is we could export different things to different platforms depending on what the consumers need to see for the coordination tasks they have. You may not want to export everything for your different people who are coordinating with you. So for this file, again, rather than going to Glue, I'm going to go to External Tools, Navisworks. I'll say that's fine. Export NWC file. That's super. Put it on my desktop. Great. So far, so good. That's looking pretty easy. Okay, so we've exported these two different NWC files. I'm just going to hide Revit for a second. You'll actually see now that they're sitting out here on my desktop. These two different NWC files. I can email those or whatever it is that I need to. But again, since it's a file, they'll only be updated as the last file that I exported. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the BIM or the Navisworks application and bring them on in. Here's the Navisworks application. So if you've installed this on your machine and open it, it looks sort of like this. We have a big kind of what they call drawing area or viewing area, just kind of right here in the center of the screen. On the left-hand side, I have something open called the selection tree. You might have to click under the Home tab, selection tree, to get that in there. And if you want to see it, you can pin it. Well, actually, I'm going to do it the other way. Looks like it was pinned. I unpinned it. Pin it. That way it's going to stay open so I can see it. You'll find that Navisworks has an awful lot of very interesting tools, so you sort of fight for screen real estate to figure out what you want. But we are going to basically append two different files, very much like merging in BIM 360, to kind of bring them together. So I'm going to append a file to this set. I'm going to get the architectural model in here. Okay. We can orbit around and take a look at that. Hopefully this looks fairly familiar to you because it's very similar to what we were doing in the whole Glue file set. Let me also go through and append the structural set in here. So I'll append again. Get the structural model in here. Again, if you're having any trouble finding things, be careful about this. As you're appending, okay, you typically want to append NWC files if you've exported them from Revit. You can see that Navisworks actually can get a whole lot of different file formats. And one of the advantages of Navisworks is that if you have some colleagues who are working in Rhino or working in SketchUp or in SolidWorks or different sort of applications, you can go through and bring those files in. IFC is a common file format for bringing things in for just different systems that aren't part of the Autodesk ecosystem. But choose whichever file format you need. If you're not seeing things, check to make sure the file filter is set properly. I'll get the structural model, say OK, and I think you can see it sort of popped in there underneath. So beautiful. Now that we have the model in there, many of the things that we can do are very similar to what we sort of saw that you can do in BIM 360 Glue. For example, if I want to just hide or not hide a model, I can highlight a model. I can say that I want to hide that item, okay, or I can unhide that item if I want to. I can get a little more fine-grained about it in terms of hiding or unhiding or selecting individual elements. Or if I want to just get all the windows on level 3, I can get them. So a lot of things we can do in here to kind of specifically select different parts of the model. And that's what, think of Navisworks as being just a big model manipulation utility. It's good for selecting and kind of operating on these different pieces that come from a lot of different types of models, Revit as well as other models. Okay, so we can bring them all together that way. We can walk through the model in the same way that we had done in Navisworks or in BIM 360 Glue, so I'm not going to sort of stress that right now. But one thing I do want to show you is really how these get saved. And what we're going to do is ultimately come through and do a file save, and let's kind of talk about what your options are. So I've created these different models. Okay, and I'm going to go to the desktop here and think about what I want to create. There are two big choices you may want to think about. There's something called a file set, Okay, and a file set is a collection of links to different files that will continue to update every time you open the file set. So think of it as a dynamic collection of different links to those files. So that's kind of nice in that it's dynamic. So they're always updating. It means that when you send someone a file set, though, you also have to send them the underlying files. And if they lose the underlying files, they won't be able to kind of see that information. But you'll tend to, for what we're doing, save things as file sets, because that dynamism is good. You want to be able to kind of update things as the model keeps changing. Okay, so we can give it a name over here. So this is going to be my integrated model set. Back over here. Save that away. So next time when I want to open this file, what I'll do is open that set, and these linked models will come in here. They'll already be appended together or merged together, which is really what we want. Okay, the other way of doing this, though, just so you have kind of the other side of the coin, is you can save as what's called a Navisworks document. And what a Navisworks document does that's a little bit different is it saves the data from the linked files within the document. So think of it almost like being an Acrobat Reader document is a sort of example I often use. It'll have all the data in there. Anyone can open that. That basically has any sort of Navisworks reader. It will be static as of the time you create it, okay, and it won't update. So if the underlying model files change, the document won't update to be the latest version. It'll still be that snapshot of the data at the point you created that document. The advantage, though, is that if you send someone the document, they get all the information they need. There's no chance they're losing things, but they're somewhat limited in what they can do with it. So for our purposes, a file set tends to be the better way to do it. But we'll do that. Super. So when you want to get the file set back, you see all the data is in there. We can just open, that's a document. We go to file set, right there, open that. Okay, and again, at that point, if the underlying file, ArcModel NWC or StructModel NWC had changed, it would be the latest information, which is really useful to us. Okay, so you've learned how to export models to Navisworks and even append them together. Next up, we're going to look at how we can actually work with those merged models and do some clash detection.